Ma'am? Ma'am? Ma'am?
I've been told to think about the ocean when I'm stressed, and I'm looking at that and I'm real stressed.
Ma'am,
No,
you're
please.
the regent!
I'm just gonna go meditate. I'm gonna think of the ocean. Bye, guys. I'm peacing out. I'll let you deal with this.
Ma'am, you're the ruler of this kingdom! You have to act!
Greetings everyone, old and new. Welcome to Haseo Reviews. I know it's been a while since my last episode and you're probably wondering where I've been. Well, to make a long story short, I moved. Yep, I'm finally out of my parents' house and living with a really cool roommate. I wanted to get settled in and get everything I needed for video production moved over before I started work on any videos, which is why it took so long to get this one out. That, and Sonic 06 has so much to cover in it that I knew it was going to take a while and be my most challenging review to write yet. Also, during all this, I lost my day job working as a barista at a local cafe, so I don't really have a steady source of income besides a small disability check I get that all goes to rent. So as far as food, gas for my car, and other things that I could possibly need for money goes, I'm kinda screwed at the moment. So I'm really gonna be pushing my Patreon and new merch harder than I did in the past. I feel really uncomfortable asking people for money, even if I know them personally, so I'm sorry if this part comes off like awkward e-begging, but I'd at least like to be able to live comfortably until I find a new job, and God knows that YouTube partnership isn't coming back anytime soon. Anyway, enough of the life stuff, let's delve into the backstory of Sonic's most infamous entry. Also, if you're wondering where the goggles are, I couldn't find them. Sonic 06 had a long and troubled development history that could fill up an entire video on its own, so I'll give the abridged version to keep this video from being too painfully long. If you want the full story, I highly recommend you check out the What Happened episode on it over at Matt McMuscle's Flophouse. Basically, the game was intended to debut on all three 7th gen consoles and coincide with Sonic's 15th anniversary. However, when the Wii specs were unveiled, the director of the project realized that it would be too gargantuan of a task to port a game of this size and scope to what was essentially a souped-up GameCube with motion controls, so he stepped down and took half the dev team with him to develop an original title for the Wii, which ended up becoming Sonic and the Secret Rings. Shun Nakamura, a Sega veteran whose only directing credits at the time consisted of Samba de Amigo for the Dreamcast and Billy Hatcher for the GameCube, was then suddenly thrust into the director's seat. To make matters worse, Sonic the Hedgehog series creator Yuji Naka left Sega midway through the development, leaving Nakamura and his team with no one to guide them on development of the game. With the end of 2006 inching closer by the minute and Sega refusing to budge on the game's release date, Sonic 06 saw release on November 14th, 2006 on the Xbox 360 and January 30th, 2007 on the PS3 to a tidal wave of negative reviews. At the time, I didn't have either console, so I wasn't able to play it for myself, but having grown up on Sonic and being in 8th grade when it came out, I refused to believe that a Sonic game could be that bad. I mean, yeah, Shadow the Hedgehog was utter garbage, but surely they learned from their mistakes on that one, right? Well, for Christmas in 2007, I received an Xbox 360 of my own along with 3 games: Guitar Hero 2, Halo 3, and Sonic 06. I played the opening segment and the first level, and I immediately knew I was in for a roller coaster of disappointment. However, As the years went on and my tastes in media started to develop more concretely, I found a new kind of bizarre love for the game. That's right, I actually enjoy Sonic 06 in a so-bad-it's-good way, like The Room or Plan 9. However, I'm going to do my best to not let that cloud my judgment and examine this with a critical eye, not from the perspective of a fanboy, and see if Sonic 06 deserves its crown as the worst Sonic game ever made. Our story begins in the world of tomorrow! More specifically, a post-apocalyptic future 200 years from now that has been devastated by an immortal fire monster called Iblis. Newcomer Silver the Hedgehog and his best friend Blaze the Cat set off to... Wait, hold up. Why is Blaze here? Okay. For those of you who don't know your Sonic lore, Blaze debuted in Sonic Rush, which states that she's a princess from an alternate dimension. And in her very next appearance, this is retconned to make her from the future. This wasn't a one-off thing either. Sonic Rivals says that Eggman Nega, who's also from Blaze's dimension, is now from the future, but future entries after that wouldn't say one way or the other where Blaze is from. So within the span of one cutscene, Sonic 06 has already created a retcon-induced plot hole that still affects the series to this day. Rant over, back to the story. Silver and Blaze defeat Iblis, but they know it's only a temporary victory since Iblis was able to regenerate. Enter Mephiles the Dark, the best character in the story, who offers Silver a proposition. Use Mephiles' time travel powers to prevent Iblis from ever being released by killing the one who released him in the first place, Sonic the Hedgehog. Silver, being a complete idiot who will believe anything anyone tells him, agrees and goes to the past. In the present day, Soliana is holding its annual Festival of the Sun. However, Elise senses a disturbance in the force, and the festival is attacked by Dr. Eggman, sporting a hideous new realistic design to mesh better with the realistic environments and humans. Before Eggman can kidnap the princess and harness her flames of disaster power for his own nefarious purposes, Sonic appears to save her. And then, mere seconds later, Eggman captures her anyway. Way to go, Sonic! Sonic meets up with Tails and decides to chase after the egg carrier on foot and fails to catch it. I mean, what did you expect when you go after a flying battleship on foot? During all of this, Silver has had a run-in with Amy, who mistook him for Sonic, how? And dragged him along with her on her search for him. After Sonic rescues Elise from Eggman's desert base, Silver attacks and the two fight, but Amy intervenes, giving Sonic a chance to escape. Also, Elise is captured again. Get used to it, it's a recurring theme. Now it's time for the story to really begin. Shadow is on a mission from Gun to rescue Rouge from Eggman's mountain base and recover the artifact that she stole from him, the Scepter of Darkness. After rendezvousing with her and heading to their designated drop point, Eggman ambushes them, demanding the scepter. However, the scepter is shattered in the ensuing scuffle, causing Eggman to retreat. A giant black mass comes out of the scepter and bonds itself with Shadow's shadow, giving birth to Mephiles the Dark, the guy we saw in the beginning of Silver's story. Mephiles immediately sends Shadow and Rouge to the future in this hilariously poorly animated shot where it looks like they all use the Team 4-star version of instant transmission. Yeah, that. Meanwhile, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles head to Eggman's base to rescue Elise again, but are caught in his trap, where they're subjected to his newest invention, a time machine called Solaris, after the Solianan sun god. Sonic and friends end up in the same ruined city 200 years in the future that Shadow and Rouge landed in, and team up to gather Chaos Emeralds so they can use Chaos Control to return to the present. Now, some of you might be saying, but Chaos Control can't send you back in time, it's only for warping and slowing down time. To that I say, get used to it, because Chaos Control gets used and abused more often than usual in this story. After defeating a giant worm version of Iblis, everyone returns to the present except for Shadow, who decides to chase after Mephiles looking for answers. Mephiles attempts, poorly I might add, to convince Shadow to join him, but Shadow ain't having none of that shit and fights him. Omega, who had been instructed by Rouge after she returned to the present to help Shadow in the future, appears to back Shadow up in the fight against Mephiles. They defeat him, but Mephiles escapes, prompting Shadow to return to the present and chase him. Back with Sonic, he catches up with Eggman to rescue Elise yet again, and is ambushed by Silver, but Shadow fights Silver, allowing Sonic and Elise to escape. Shadow delivers the most satisfying roundhouse kick in history. Can we see that again? Oh yeah, that's good. Shadow and Silver both use Chaos Control at the same time, showing that Chaos Control is about as special and unique of an ability as the Super Saiyan, and they travel back to the past to see the origins of Mephiles and Iblis. 10 years ago, the Duke of Soliana was running an experiment to harness the power of the sun god Solaris for something. It's never really explained, but the experiment goes haywire and explodes, splitting Solaris into two beings, the Flames of Disaster Iblis and Mephiles the Dark. Shadow is given the Scepter of Darkness by the Duke and chases after and seals Mephiles, setting up Mephiles' plot for revenge in the future via stable time loop bullshit. And Silver chases after Iblis, where the Duke seals it inside of an unconscious Elise, telling her with his last words that if she ever cries, Iblis will be released. Okay, rant time again. I understand suspension of disbelief, yada yada yada, but we're supposed to seriously believe that she went 10 years without crying a single time? Does crying from being around sliced onions count? Tears of joy? Injuring herself? And why is it crying that unseals Iblis? You'd think a beast of pure destruction would be unleashed by something like rage? Just picture this knockoff real doll Kairi hulking out when someone pisses her off one too many times and destroying the world in a sea of flames. That would have been awesome! Sonic returns Elise to the castle, only for her to get captured by Eggman again. Sonic goes after her, but this time is assisted by Silver, who's had a change of heart. However, they're too late, as the egg carrier has had a malfunction and crashed, killing Eggman and Elise. Sonic and Silver then remember that they have time travel powers that they can use whenever they want, making this scene completely pointless. Sonic goes slightly back in the past, while Silver and Blaze return to the future. Sonic manages to get on board the egg carrier before it launches, he has a final showdown with Eggman, and saves Elise, wrapping up his part of the story. Meanwhile, Shadow, Rouge, and Omega have been chasing leads on Mephiles and recreated the Scepter of Darkness to seal him again. They chase him down to the desert. Mephiles tries and fails rather spectacularly again to turn Shadow to his side. They have their final showdown, and Shadow defeats Mephiles. However, Mephiles is immortal, and creates an endless army of clones to overwhelm Shadow and friends. Shadow takes off his limiter rings, thereby making that little bit from Sonic X canon to the games, and charges through at full power through Mephiles' army, ending his story. Silver and Blaze, back in the future, track down Iblis' current position, planning to defeat it once and for all. After defeating it one final time, Silver tries to use the Chaos Emeralds to seal Iblis inside of himself, but Iblis rejects him as its host. Blaze then steps in to offer herself as its vessel, which works. She seals herself in another dimension to prevent Iblis from causing any more trouble, leaving Silver alone and bringing his story to a close. Alright, you know the drill for these adventure-era games. It's time for the final story. Mephiles distracts Sonic and Elise with a flashing light, and uses this moment of weakness to kill Sonic. Yep, just when you thought it couldn't get more tonally dissonant than Shadow the Hedgehog, Mephiles just straight up murders Sonic, causing Elise to cry and release Iblis. Mephiles then summons all of the Chaos Emeralds to his location and uses them to bond with Iblis once more, becoming Solaris and ripping time and space apart. Time for another rant! So, since Mephiles' plan this whole time was to rebond with Iblis, why didn't he just do that at any other point in the timeline? Nothing in the game states that he has to do it when Iblis was first released from Elise's body, so why not just bond with it in the future when it's already at full power? Or why not bond with it in the timeline where Elise died in the egg carrier crash, which is what apparently originally caused Iblis to be released? I really like Mephiles as a villain for how he plays so many sides against each other to further his own goals, but this plan just reeks of complexity addiction. Everyone, except for Blaze for some reason, finds themselves in the same hub between time and space that was created when Solaris destroyed the world. Everyone sees Sonic's corpse and mourns his death, but Elise, and I quote, feels him in the wind, meaning that he isn't really dead, just mostly dead. And as the Princess Bride taught me, there's a big difference. The gang splits up to gather the Chaos Emeralds, and Elise uses their power, combined with the power of her newfound furry fetish, to bring Sonic back to life, powered up into Super Sonic to boot. Shadow and Silver go super as well, and the three hedgehogs set off to separate eras in the timeline to defeat Solaris once and for all. They beat Solaris, and Sonic and Elise find themselves in the middle of nowhere with Solaris in its base form, a flame in a cup. Odd choice, if I do say so myself. If Elise puts out the flame, everything that happened will be undone and the universe will be returned to normal, but since that means she and Sonic will never meet, she decides she'd rather sacrifice all of reality just to be with her hedgehog boyfriend.
The caucasity of this bitch.
Sonic thankfully convinces her to go through with it, and Elise blows out the flame, effectively making it so everything we went through in the game never really happened. The game ends with Soliana holding its Festival of the Sun from the opening cutscene of Sonic's story, although now that Solaris was erased from history, I have no idea what they're worshipping. Except Eggman doesn't attack this time. Elise feels Sonic's presence again, hinting that she may still remember what happened, and the game ends on a shot of Sonic watching the festivities. Fuck this story. Sonic 06's plot is overly convoluted and full of holes for the kind of grand, epic tale that it's trying to tell. The characters we've come to know and love all act out of character, coming off as just bland and interchangeable, and the two new characters, Elise and Silver, are useless and obnoxiously dumb, respectively. Elise serves no purpose other than to being a living MacGuffin/damsel in distress, and Silver is even more gullible than Knuckles was in Sonic X, which is really saying something. Despite being the title character of the game, Sonic himself is pretty much irrelevant to the overall plot, as most of the plot development happens in Shadow and Silver's stories. Eggman, despite being the main villain of the franchise, could have been completely cut out of the plot, since his plans have nothing to do with anything that occurs in the rest of the story. Same goes for Blaze, who does so little that I barely found anything she does that's worth mentioning in my plot summary. Mephiles is a great villain, but it's mostly due to everyone else being portrayed as gullible and idiotic. The presentation here is an extremely mixed bag. Environments look gorgeous, but the character models are hideous, looking more like puppets than real creatures. The soundtrack is absolutely fantastic, featuring a full orchestra for the first time in the series, which really adds to the epic feel the game is trying to go for. The final boss theme against Solaris especially stands out as one of the best final battle themes in Sonic history, going for an orchestral version of the game's main theme, His World, instead of the regular version that plays during the ending credits. The game also does a commendable job attempting to tie into the whole 15th anniversary thing by throwing in mechanics and references from previous games, including the return of panel jumps from Sonic Adventure, presented here as scripted sequences, and a twist on the whale chase scene from Sonic Adventure's Emerald Coast in the Seaside Hill level. The 4Kids cast returns for this game, and they managed to sound even worse than they did in Shadow the Hedgehog, with everyone except for Eggman and Mephiles either overacting or underacting every single one of their lines. New to the cast is Hollywood actress Lacey Chabert as Elise, who you may remember as Eliza Thornberry from the Wild Thornberrys, Zatanna from the current DC animated universe, and the star of the awful Christian Mingle movie. Yes, that is a thing that exists. She does a passable job here, but she sounds wildly out of place among the cartoony-sounding heroes and villains. As far as gameplay goes, it's somehow more streamlined than previous entries by having only 3 main characters, but even more of a clusterfuck because of how many characters are actually playable. Does that sound like it doesn't make sense? Then allow me to elaborate in excruciating detail. Sonic plays like he did in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, but with a far slower running speed, janky physics, lots of scripted sequences, and some major nerfs to his moveset. The spin dash is still present technically, but it's absolutely useless, meaning you'll be relying on the homing attack to deal damage. However, the homing attack has been screwed up too, as it now has a recovery period after each use, meaning that you can't chain it together quickly like you could in previous games, and it leaves you wide open to potshots from nearby enemies. Along the way, Sonic gets new and returning abilities like the Light Dash, which is so finicky that I almost never use it, the Bounce Bracelet, which is extremely overpowered, and new gem abilities. The gems are absolutely broken beyond belief due to one simple programming mistake. See that power meter in the corner of the screen? It's supposed to drain when you use one of the gem abilities, but that was never actually implemented, meaning you can use them indefinitely. Gaze in awe as I use the shrinking double jump to completely skip this physics puzzle. Watch as I use time slow to rack up a massive time bonus and make it so enemies can't hit me. That's not to say that Sonic's gameplay is a total breeze though, and 2 roadblocks pop up in the form in Mach Speed sections and the 3 tests. During Mach Speed sections, Sonic decides he needs to speed up and overcompensates by going so fast that he's borderline impossible to control. A slight tap on the analog stick sends him flying left or right. Making contact with literally any object causes you to spin out of control and lose all of your rings, and if you run into a wall, you can get stuck in a loop until you inevitably die. Meanwhile, the 3 tests are a series of mandatory side missions that Sonic must pass in order to enter Kingdom Valley. One of them requires you to kill every enemy without taking a single hit, which is borderline luck-based. One of them has you jumping through a series of different portals until you find the right path that leads you to the exit, which is easier said than done when everything looks the same and the camera is beyond useless. And the final test just has you choosing who your waifu is. It's one of the most blatant cases of pace-breaking filler I've ever seen in a game to this day, and just brings the whole momentum of the story to a screeching halt. Shadow plays similarly to Sonic, with the same basic moveset, but with more of an emphasis on combat and vehicle sections returning from his solo game. Shadow can execute a 5-hit combo after homing attacking enemies, which is faster than having to wait for an arbitrary recovery period like Sonic, but still leaves you open to attack. He also gains a series of chaos powers throughout the game, but they're never encouraged or required outside the Mephiles fight, and one time when you need to clear some rocks. Weird. The vehicles control horribly, will take damage for no apparent reason, and can often flip over, especially the hovercraft, which will cause an instant death if you're in the water when it happens. Silver can't attack enemies directly like Sonic and Shadow can, instead either needing to pick up and throw objects at them with his psychokinesis, or stun them and then pick them up. He moves painfully slow, and the lack of any way to deal direct damage coupled with the utterly broken physics engine makes Silver an absolute chore to play as. But that's not the end of our gameplay coverage, folks. At certain points in different stages, control will be shifted from the main hedgehog you're playing as to one of their amigos, as the game calls them. Tails moves painfully slow, can only attack with dummy ring bombs that are difficult to aim due to the lack of an aiming reticle, and gets tired way too quickly when flying. Knuckles has a pathetic short-range punch and gets stuck on walls when climbing them. Rouge can only attack with hard-to-aim bombs and, like Knuckles, gets stuck on walls while climbing. Omega has a useless lock-on attack, an overpowered aerial attack, and a glide that can be exploited by tapping the jump button over and over to essentially allow him to fly indefinitely. Amy is a worse version of her Sonic Adventure counterpart with a useless double jump and invisibility move. And Blaze is actually pretty fun to play as, feeling like a better Sonic, which is why it hurts that you only get to play as her a couple of times. Special mention for bullshit amigo sequences goes to Shadow's second stage, Kingdom Valley, where Rouge has to find 3 keys to open a door. However, unlike Sonic Adventure 2, she has no radar to point her in the right direction, so you just fly around aimlessly in search of 3 needles in a haystack. Needless to say, Sonic 06 is a clusterfuck of a game when looking at it from an objective critical standpoint, but I don't know, I just keep finding myself drawn back to it. Maybe it's the sometimes hilarious glitches, maybe it's the laughable plot that takes itself so seriously that it verges on melodrama, maybe it's the functional but still broken gameplay, but whatever it is, I get the same kind of ironic joy from playing this as I do from watching The Room or an Ed Wood movie. I won't deny that it's bad, but I can still get a laugh out of it, especially with friends, as you can see from my old Let's Play of it from a few years ago that I did with my cousin, Miss Palindrome. If there's one good thing that came out of Sonic 06, it's that it gave Sonic Team the kick in the ass they needed to realize that what they were doing with the franchise wasn't working anymore, and caused them to shift gears 2 years later with Sonic Unleashed, leading to the modern era that I have some pretty mixed thoughts on, but I'll save those for another time. I feel like that's more than enough 3D Sonic games for now, so for the next episode I had a poll on Twitter to decide what to cover after this episode was finished, and you guys decided on retro game compilations. However, I decided to tweak that a bit so I didn't cover the same ground that Scott the Woz did, because he is just on a whole other level of awesomeness that I could not possibly try to compete with. Tune in next time for a retrospective on various Sonic and Mega Man collections to see how well each one performs and which one I think is the definitive collection for each series. I've been Haseo, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Laters. Hey guys, thanks for checking out the video, and thanks for staying till the end if you actually bothered to put up with me for that long. I'm kinda making this up as I go because I'm not used to doing these end slate things yet, so I haven't come up with a concrete script for these, so I apologize if I start rambling. I'm sorry this one took so long to come out, but I hope it was worth the wait in the end. I really hope so, because I have no idea how this is going to turn out until it's already out. Tune in for the next episode, which should be out pretty soon, because I already went and pre-recorded all the footage for it in advance. This has been a really productive year for me on YouTube, and I'd like to thank all the new followers that I've gained, all the new subscribers, people that decide to check me out, share me around, whatever you do. I appreciate it very much from the bottom of my heart. I've been on YouTube for 10 years, and I finally feel like I found something to do that I can really be proud of. Links to my Patreon and my new Teespring merch store are on screen and in the description. You can check out Paradiox Productions for the Abridged series that I direct and act in, Transformers Armada Bridge, as well as the other Abridged series that's currently on hiatus, Abridgimon Frontier. And lastly, you can check out my Twitch channel down in the description, where I do live streams whenever the spirit moves me to actually get off my ass and set up a stream. Once I start building up like a Patreon following, if that ever happens, I'll also be filling these End Slate segments with shoutouts to every single one of my patrons. So yeah, check out the Patreon. I'm working on rewards for that, like seeing videos early, exclusive behind-the-scenes stuff, Q&A and requests, viewer raffles, polls, all that kind of stuff that I would really like to engage with my viewer base on. And lastly, follow me on my social media pages, links in the description below. I've got Facebook and Twitter, and I'm thinking about setting up an Instagram once I figure out what all that is about. So yes, I've rambled on for more than enough now, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Laters.